Star Trek and the firm who did the song that said, "Life is wonderful." Why do I say that? Well, my life isn't normal because I have mental health issues, i.e. bipolar and Asperger's. So what I was going to do was tell you what my life is like, because very few people understand it. So we'll start off at the bottom. Bipolar means two different ends. It's two ends. One is, well, I don't like being in the top end, and I certainly don't like being in the bottom end. I prefer being in the middle. So, bottom end, what does that mean? Well, that is probably the worst thing that can happen to anybody, because if you go down too low, you end up suicidal. Now, I can remember preparing my suicide kit to use because I was heading in that direction. And it wasn't until the therapist talked to me about suicide kit. What do you mean you've got one? And I explained it. She said, "You're not going to do that. You'll talk to me before you do that." And so suicide is the bottom end. But if you go up a little bit, there's all these things which are not nice. Things like sleep. You cannot get enough sleep. You cannot concentrate. And so if you're working, which is I was working, it was very hard getting up and going to work. And not just that, I couldn't speak. My speech went slow and slower. I couldn't get sentences together. And my sex drive had gone. Now, that was awful. So being in the bottom end is not nice. As you move up, as I said, there are other things that go on in your life. You've got no energy. Which, lack of appetite. Now I could use that, lack of appetite, and I might lose some weight, but I have not been that low for a long time, so I'm in the sort of middle, and that's held there by drugs. And so I don't have a problem as long as I take the pills. I did stop taking the pills. I decided that it was great, I'm perfect, no problem, don't need them. And my wife said, "You don't know what will happen." I said, "Nothing's going to happen, I'm fine." So I stopped taking the pills. Ooh. Within a week, she said, "You start taking them or you go back to Swindon." Thinking, was I that bad? Yes, I was awful. It was irritability. The slightest thing she said, I would react to and have a go at her about. Shouting, yes, all sorts of things. Because I had absolutely no control over what I was doing or thinking. We met from the middle bit going up. Now this is where it gets dangerous, the up bit. Because when you're in the up part, you are absolutely stupid. You will make the most incredibly stupid business decisions. You will make choices in your life which you would never do in the real world. But buy. I used to buy watches because I collect watches. And I would think nothing of spending £2,000 or £3,000 on a watch. So I can't buy it. I even bought a sports car one day. Now I couldn't really afford that, so I had to sell it quite quickly. But you know, I was feeling so strong that I could do that. You know, there's no problem. Speech, very fast. When I was really high, I would be speaking far too fast, and sometimes my brain couldn't keep up with what I was saying. It's usually the other way around, but with me, I would be saying things, and my brain would be trying to catch up with me. The one good thing about that is that you can do the amazing things with design and development. I used to come up with the most incredible concepts at night usually, and go into the office and start on it, and it would work. You know, that's just incredible. But the downside was it was so hard to maintain the ability to continue with the project. And I'd do a project, do the prototype, and say, sorry, you lot get on with it now. And I don't well that well, I'm going to go and do another one. And so it was okay because people understood. Even when I was in Africa, the boss, when I was in Liberia, she said within 2 or 3 weeks of me starting the job, you don't like writing reports, I'll write the reports, you make sure the job gets done. So, perfect, absolutely perfect. And the worst thing, well, some people wouldn't think it would be the worst thing, but the worst thing for me, my sex drive went through the roof. Now, when you're in Africa, you do not want to be having sex. And so I didn't. You know, obviously, I was with it enough not to do it because of AIDS. And the rest of the time in Africa, because I was not fully controlled, I used to be near the top most of the time. So I could not die. Impossible to be killed. Impossible. You know, no, how are they going to kill me? You know? So I would get into the most crazy situations. Middle of a gun battle, just wandering along. You know. And I can remember crawling through one part and thinking, this is stupid, I've got no idea which way I'm going. So I stood up and was looking around trying to work out where to go. And all the others were shouting, get down, get down. And I think, well, you know, that's where we've got to go, folks, over there. So everybody crawled that way, and I went with them. But that is the problem with it. So you've got these two things. You've got this massive high, you've got this massive low, and you've got to be in the middle. And so if you can get diagnosed, took them 14 years to diagnose what I really had. If you diagnose and you go on to lithium or similar drugs and antidepressants, you can get yourself in a situation where you're completely level. Most of the time I'm just below level, and so I'm in the depressive side of it, so I do have a few things relating to that. And of course, having PTSD as well, last night I was watching something that Carol had recorded, and I had to go out the room because it was Lucy Wolsey or something doing the Blitz. Mm-hmm. Or when they started bombing, and there were the flashes and the sounds, that was taking me straight back into the middle of a battle, so I had to go. And she said, I forgot, I should have stopped. But, last one, Asperger's. Heard of Asperger's? Mm-hmm. Oh God, that is awful. Absolutely awful. I say things quite often which I shouldn't have. Eye contact, I've trained myself to be able to look in people's eyes. But I can't do what most people do, which is flip from eyeball to eyeball. And they sort of, if you notice, when you're looking close to somebody, they're doing it across. And I can't. I'm locked. You don't do it?
No, I can't do it.
Well, I lock onto one. Yeah, I lock onto one eyeball and that's it, because I can't do the rest of it. And so, speech, well, some of the things I've said, I was at a wedding, and it was an elderly friend of mine who got married, and she was 80, and she was dressed up, beautifully dressed up, and I said, wow, you're eminently into the net. And she says, fortunately, she's a psychiatrist, so she said, Brian, you shouldn't say that. And, oh, all right. But that's the problem with Asperger's. You've got this ability to say all the wrong things at the wrong times, and you have no ability to judge emotions from people's faces. I cannot judge a person's face. You know, if you're angry with me, I wouldn't notice at all. But anyway, I've gone on far too long. So that's it. Thank you. Questions.
I would say, Brian, that you do keep us all very intrigued. Yes.
Thank you for sharing.
It's a matter. People don't really know a lot about what bipolar really is, and now that I'm stable, it's great. You know. But before I was stable, it was awful. I'd drink a bottle of whiskey in a session, you know, because there was two of us that did it. There was this Dutch Marine commando, and he would sit down with me and we'd just knock it back, a bottle each. And I remember going into the club in Malmesbury, where we had a club, and I asked for 2 glasses of whiskey, and the voice came from the back, give them a bottle, when they finished it, give them 1 more, and no more after that. Well known for drinking.
When did you first realise that something was wrong, and why did you seek help?
Oh, I knew something was wrong way back in the early, it must have been the early 70s. I knew there was a problem. And I'd go and see various GPs and specialists, nobody could come up with a solution. And eventually, because of the PTSD, I went to see a psychiatrist who, when I talked about the depression side of it, she said, well, you're bipolar. So, what's that? And she explained, and I could then see why my life was all over the place, and why my first wife used to get into real aggro with me because I never understood what was going on. So, yeah, so I've had it a long time, 14 years to get to the diagnosis, which is a bit too long, really. You going to say something, Sheila?
Yeah, I've suffered from depression. I didn't know why I was suffering from depression. And apparently depression can be inherent. But I learned, because I didn't want to go on pills, not to go up and then I wouldn't go down because I was doing this seesaw. So I take the top, I don't ever get excited, and I would go down and I do not get excited. But I believe it was from my father, and that was the First World War, because he was always suffering from serious depression. But we never put our finger on it. And I'm still the same. I don't have to take any pills, but if everybody's getting excited about something, I sit and think, get on with it, get on with it.
I can remember in Rwanda we were working on a project and one of the lads drove the jeep with the computers out and I was screaming at him because I hadn't tightened all the computers up, they were going to fall out. So I was really having a go at him. And one of the other lads said, Brian, go back to the hotel and get your happy pills. Yeah,
But I had a lad that he was Asperger's, a very serious one, no eye contact, everything black and white.
Yeah,
He was with me for some time. He's got brilliant eye contact, his communication skills are fantastic. He's worked it out though.
Yeah,
His mum and dad encouraged him to come and have worked.
It took me a while to get the eye contact sorted because I knew that I couldn't have no eye contact and have relationships with people because working, you can't sort of not look at people when you're working with them.
Yeah.
You know, just keep away, sort of always going to one side away, not looking at them. And yeah, I learned how to do that because I was aware of it. Anyone else?
You've done a fantastic job, Brian.
Yeah.
Yes.
The modern phrase that I've heard quite recently, but applied to a young man in there, is neurodiversity, and it seems to cover. I don't really understand the spectrum of autism, Asperger's.
You can't really talk about Asperger's now. That is you're part of this spectrum. You're a high functioning autistic. Well, I was a high functioning autistic. Still am. I still have problems with what I say and shouldn't say. So I've done that a couple of times here. I made a few comments which I shouldn't have done. But most people didn't realise that what I was doing, and so they just made a joke of it. It was funny, which is just as well.
I just wonder how many, many people, looking back, people like Mozart, Beethoven, all sorts of incredibly people.
That's one of the things about being bipolar. Yeah. There's a lot of people who've got it that are very, very clever. Spike Milligan had it quite badly. And I think when I was on my highs, that was when I could do my design work.
Yeah.
And when I was doing, I think I had about 4 or 5 patents to my name. And it was simply because I never had to write it down, it just appeared in front of me when I was just working. I could actually work through the bits and pieces without writing it down and put it all together, and it would work.
Incredible.
I recently visited Sir Isaac Newton's home 2 months ago, and the lady took us around, and she was describing Isaac Newton when he was a young child, and eventually did all his things and self-taught and in Parliament, and he's involved in finance. Asperger's, because she said he was a terrible individual. He had a terrible character. But he was self-taught on everything. He was just, you know, bouncing all the, but they didn't have the drugs to calm that down. But that was back in
Yeah, but if they had given him the drugs, he wouldn't have been as...
No,
Well, that's true.
That's what I
That's
noticed.
true.
One of the big problems with taking lithium is that everything has slowed down. I can't do the design work that I used to do. It takes me ages.
When your wife would suffer that.
Yeah, well, she really has learnt to put up with it, and she's done a very good job of that. She rarely tells me to get to my shed.
Is there a bed in the shed?
There is a beautiful reclining chair, with a sheepskin and a huge television, so that's at one end of the shed.
No,
I work at the other end. Right.
Yeah. Just one quick comment. I remember seeing a television programme in which they took a number of quite young autistic people up in a helicopter around London, as though they were flying around the New York there, and they came back and they drew exactly what they'd seen, absolutely perfectly. I'm still astounded when I think of that they, you know, the brain can do that.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary, but yeah, they were very badly autistic as a matter of fact. I mean, they wouldn't talk even to each other or have any contact with anyone, but their brains were so highly developed in that sense that they could do that. There must be an enormous amount of research going on about this all the time that is going to show you know, some
Incredible
positive results.
music and everything.
Well, if you remember the Rain Man film, Dustin Hoffman, he was in the casino.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do
He was what's known as a savant,
Yeah.
which a lot of these are. You know, it's just amazing the stuff they can do.
Actually, the military and actually big corporations actually look for those type of people to do specialist functions.
Yeah. Because they get locked into one thing,
Correct.
totally obsessed.
And they see things that us normal people haven't a clue about.
My latest obsession, which has been running for about 2 years now, is my toothbrush. So it's electric, so I clean my teeth. And when I finish cleaning my teeth, I wash the brush, pull it off, clean the body of the electric, stick it into the box, stick the toothbrush into the box, close the box. I've got to do that before the light goes off. So the light on the and if I don't, I've got to take it all out and start again.
Paranoia.
It's obsessive, you know. Just in Rwanda, it used to be with the lift. I had to operate the lift in a particular sequence, and if the lift didn't move in the time scale that I'd given it, I had to go back down and go back in again. Terrible. It really is.
You're surviving.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.